I think it was Ohio State, Michigan, 85. And I'm like, let me turn on the TV and see what this Michigan football thing's all about. Never knew that it would get me so emotionally invested the rest of my life. Michigan football affects my mood in a way that is unhealthy.
Human beings are a fascinating species. The different paths individuals take throughout their little slice of space and time is wide-ranging and beautifully eclectic. We're a captivating band of misfits, are we not? And certainly worthy of exhausting examination and analysis. We love, we hate, we kiss, we fight. We're complex creatures, and we're on an endless mission to understand ourselves. To do that, we often look to extremes, the most amplified versions of us. And a perfect space for that is sports. Better yet, sports rivalries.
Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer meet in a match that dangles $50,000 in first prize money.
There's something about a sports rivalry that makes humans go haywire. They bring out our best.
The fight wouldn't go the distance. I'll stop it. Stop me, you.
Or our worst. But why? Why do rivals make us work, cheat, hustle, and even hug? Rivalries are everywhere, and they explain a lot about who we are and how we tick. So understanding them might just help us understand something about ourselves.
I'm Dr. Joe Cobbs.
My name is David Tyler, and I'm a
co-founder of the No Rivalry Project.
Our main area of research is around sport rivalry. The way that we got interested in rivalry was
We were working on a paper and looking for the research in rivalry that we could cite.
needed a quick definition of rivalry. So I went out to the literature and realized that definition did not exist. There was not an academic consensus around what rivalry is and what it means and what its core properties are.
We started to dig into it. Eventually, the No Rivalry Project was formulated.
Joe and David's No Rivalry Project is a decade-long study into what really makes a rivalry. It's based on thousands of fan surveys and different scientific theories. And while you may think that conceptually pinning down exactly what rivalry is seems intuitive, you know, Team A hates Team B, think again, or overthink again.
Can't we just use a computer?
Dude, it's for dramatic effect. Just go with it.
The definition of rivalry is a conflict with a highly salient outgroup that poses an acute threat and enhancement to in-group member identity and/or esteem.
Did you guys try to cast someone that looked vaguely like me? You could have just asked. Anyway, this is Joe and David's definition of rivalry. And while it may sound a bit over-intellectualized, it isn't. And it's important. Let's break it down. So, in-groups and out-groups. An in-group is us, any group of people we identify with and show favoritism for. An out-group is them, literally any group that isn't us. Now, there can be many different out-groups, i.e. different opponents. But certain opponents can be highly salient or most top of mind.
An acute threat is a very focused threat. We're not going to accomplish our goals if we don't overcome that opponent.
Now, that threat can enhance your identity whenever you defeat it or just by existing as your rival.
Fans, they even identify with that rivalry. So enhancement can come from just being part of that rivalry and having those games take on greater meaning.
So, with the help of Joe and David and psychologists, sociologists, and neuroscientists who specialize in rivalry, we'll get much deeper into the science of this. But what we need now is a case study. There's no better sport in the U.S. to find one than college football.
College football is a terrific context to study rivalry because of the history that's involved. There's more of an opportunity for a narrative to develop over time. And that's really what rivalry is, narrative.
In college football, those narratives are endless, and they often include a trophy, or a boot, or a big hat, or a bronze pig. But there are two teams that don't need a trophy. They just need a Saturday in late November to play a game. The game.
So how big is this rivalry? It's a hell of a lot more than football. This is not rational, people. It's not healthy. But Sigmund Freud himself said the following, and I quote, "The narcissism of minor differences, the phenomenon that is precisely communities with adjoining territories,
We're engaged in constant feuds and ridiculing each other.
and exhibit extreme sensitivity to just these details of differentiation." Yeah, Sigmund Freud, it turns out, was a gigantic Big Ten football fan who studied Michigan, Ohio State, because that's the whole damn thing. We're better than you are. No, we're better than you are. And it's based on God knows what. That's a rivalry.
Okay, folks, here's your disclaimer.
J.K. Simmons back here on the Rich
I'm
Eisen.
pretty close to this rivalry. I was born in Michigan, but raised in
All right,
Columbus.
switching hats. Off goes the Tigers. There goes the Ohio State
And
hat.
I am a
Man of many hats, J.K.
diehard
Simmons.
Buckeye.
Thank you. J.K., I don't get it, man. You didn't even go to the school.
Rich, my dad taught there.
I know why. You're not even from the state.
Dude, I lived there till I was 18.
I don't understand it. We need to deprogram J.K.
All right, that's enough of you. Listen, I'm going to do my best to play this straight because this rivalry is way bigger than just one fan. And here's why.
There is a reason why this game is called the game.
I say the Ohio State-Michigan game is the biggest rivalry in all the sports.
Two ancient rivals, and the stakes have never been higher. In a series that dates back to 1897.
A geographical rivalry, and then you get a generational rivalry.
They snap it. Haskins dives. Touchdown Wolverines.
Constant competition.
Touchdown.
That's why I chose Michigan.
Brady and the Wolverines cash in.
It is the week that I can't wait for.
It was named the game for a reason.
Two super oil tankers coming at each other.
Hey, you gotta hit it!
I don't think there's anything else quite like it. It's one of one.
This is real. It's visceral.
If you don't like to risk everything, then you should never be a part of a rivalry like this.
This is not a game. This is war.
Now that's a case study.
Rivalries are natural. They form organically.
Humans are fundamentally a social species. We need both a sense of belonging to a particular group, but then a sense of competition with an outgroup.
Once we decide who we care for, we got to find out who we don't like, right? So
how do those we don't like become our rivals?
One of the first things we did with our research was just trying to understand what makes up a rivalry.
Our survey data allows us to look at a really broad picture of rivalry. Over time, as we started to field that survey, commonalities started to emerge.
We went through and extracted 10 different core elements of rivalry. We grouped these into 3 buckets. Think of them as the ingredients to the rivalry recipe.
We have all of our delicious ingredients laid out, so let's get started on our rivalry. Now, there are a lot of ways to make a beautiful rivalry.
All rivalry recipes are a little bit unique in terms of how those ingredients are mixed together.
So let's take a cup of conspicuous moments and mix it with competitiveness.
So you might see common ingredients across a lot of different rivalries, but which out of the 10 ingredients come together is often unique to any particular rivalry.
You're guaranteed a lovely, mouth-watering rivalry.
Thank you, Annie. So to recap, that's 3 buckets, 10 ingredients, and a lot of alliteration. Consider this our rivalry rubric. And Ohio State-Michigan ticks just about all the boxes. So we are going to go bucket by bucket and see why
this is
the biggest
rivalry in all of sports.
Michigan-Ohio State is the #1 sports rivalry. There's nothing that compares to it.
Let us begin with conflict conditions.
Conflict conditions are the tangible threat, is where that narrative starts to develop.
These conflict conditions offer us the opportunity to measure ourselves against our rivals.
When you think about conflict conditions, how often do I come into conflict with this particular opponent? You think about the consistency. How competitive is the rivalry?
Uh-oh, this one doesn't look so competitive. No, guys, this is a family-friendly program. Oh, boy. Moving on.
Representing Michigan was two-time All-American and
Within Ohio State, Michigan football, there's a synergy between consistency and competitiveness because of the long history.
Two people who know that history better than anyone else are John Bacon and Jack Park.
There's so many numbers here.
The unofficial historians of Michigan and Ohio State football. On the field, this rivalry spans back to the late 1800s, but some say it started well before then.
Michigan was founded by upstate New York industrialists. Ohio was founded by failed Virginia farmers. You see the difference here, don't you? So right there, you're making friends. But anyway.
The National Football League was formed in 1920, but Ohio State had played Michigan for the first time 23 years before that. The first game was played in 1897.
The early days of the rivalry weren't much. It was all Michigan. They were beating the best teams in the Ivy Leagues, the first Midwestern team outside of the Ivy Leagues to win national titles. When Michigan leaves the Big Ten for 10 years, who takes their spot but the Buckeyes of Ohio State? And now when Michigan comes back in 1918, this thing starts to heat up.
Since that inaugural game in 1897, these teams have played over 115 times, and they're two of the top 5 most successful programs in college football history. And all this success has allowed the next two ingredients in conflict conditions to thrive, and those are
conspicuous characters and conspicuous moments. Any good narrative has moments that people remember, characters that people remember.
These are the defining moments that help shape that narrative. And so conspicuous characters often create conspicuous moments.
Ohio State versus Michigan has no shortage of memorable characters and moments. But we'll start with one game that really caused this rivalry to snowball.
I wish I had some better weather news to give you on this holiday. Cue the snow machine, Bert. Yeah, this is nothing compared to what they're dealing with in the great state of Ohio. This is shaping up to be the all-time worst blizzard in U.S. history. And from what we're hearing, that darn Ohio State and Michigan game is still going to be played. They should call this thing the Snow Bowl, Marty.
This unbelievable blizzard comes in, and they play the game, and they can barely see the ball in half the plays.
And as you can see, the weather is pretty bad. There's the Michigan team coming out. One of the worst days for football we've ever had. Kickoff.
The Michigan player is saying at one point, if I don't get up now, I'm going to be left for dead. So that's how bad this was.
The field got so bad that they couldn't run on it, and all they could do was punt to the other team on first down and hope for the other team to fumble.
And that set the pattern for a play all day long.
Chuck Ortman and Vic Janowicz together punted 45 times. That'll be an NCAA record that'll probably never be broken.
Michigan plays inspired ball in about 1.5 feet of snow.
Ohio State had a punt blocked. Tony Monson blocked the punt, and then he fell on the ball in the end zone for the game's only touchdown. Michigan won the game 9-3.
That game cost Ohio State's coach, Wes Fessler, his job. Who is the next coach at Ohio State? A guy named Wayne Woodrow Hayes. Who's his protege? A guy named Glenn E. Bo Schembechler. I tell you now, we're now for that blocked punt. The 10-year war is never going to happen, and we're probably not talking.
You freshmen are not listening again. You're not either. You're up here in the king row and you haven't got a shirt on. Don't come in here again without a shirt on. And I get on you because you're in the front row. When a mistake is made, I like to get on to my best ones, not onto the rinky-dink kid that's sitting in the back row. I like to get on the guy in the front row.
There is no more conspicuous character in the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry than Wayne Woodrow Hayes. When Hayes was hired in 1951, not many knew his name. But over the next 27 years, he'd become one of America's greatest sports icons.
I don't know how do you sum up Woody Hayes. I mean, that's a whole other show.
Woody Hayes, he was a very complex man.
He has got to have been, along with General George Patton, the most intense and disciplined American ever born.
He was an Ohio native. He was in the Navy. Changed Ohio State football forever.
The players who played for him adored him. But he had this temper, and it was kind of uncontrollable. He couldn't control it.
He's the guy you got to hit him.
He didn't make mistakes in practice.
You cannot be that deliberate, for God's sake.
Because you're talking about a temper. That's when he really kind of go off.
He once punched himself in the face. It was a real punch. I mean, glasses flew. This is the real deal.
Dumb.
Woody Hayes' teams played the same way he treated his face. Smash mouth football. Powered by his signature 3 yards in a cloud of dust style, the Buckeyes started running through the Big Ten and Michigan.
There's like Ohio State before Woody, and then there's Ohio State after Woody.
From 1951 to 1967, he won 3 national titles, 4 Big Ten championships, and beat that team up north 11 times. Woody's dedication to winning football games was borderline obsessive, because to him, Ohio State was about much more than football.
Woody Hayes was a military historian.
He liked to teach his players about history and military battles and really relating so much of life to football for them.
In his mind, football was a model for how the country should be run. You did what you were told, you sacrificed for the team.
I try to make something from Ohio State football that people can look up to, and believe me, they do.
I mean, to him, Ohio was the best of the country. Ohio State was the best of football, and football was the best of America.
You don't get along on mediocrity in football. You've got to be a winner.
All these things that really, really bothered Woody Hayes, a lot of them were connected to Ann Arbor.
I got almost everything.
Ann Arbor was really a countercultural center. They had all these long-haired hippies smoking weed. Were they connected to the football program? No, but could Woody Hayes separate these things in his mind? That wasn't really how Woody Hayes thought.
In 1968, Woody's Buckeyes, led by a group of super sophomores, were on the brink of an undefeated season when they hosted Michigan.
That 1968 team was dominant. They would stomp most of the teams they played.
In 1968, the Michigan game against Ohio State was 21-14 at the halftime, and then the Buckeyes outscored Michigan 29-0 in the second half. That gave them 50 points, and Woody Hayes kept the offense on the field.
It's quite possible, Lee, that Ohio State may try for 2 here.
And he had them go for 2. You were up 50-14. Why did you go for 2? And Woody said, because they wouldn't let us go for 3.
Well, because they wouldn't let me go for 3.
He said he couldn't go for 3.
Because I couldn't go for,
I don't think you quite understand that.
He did not say that. And he had made that comment, but it wasn't in 1968.
And that's what gets me about Woody Hayes is there's probably a good bit of myth involved, but the record he had against Michigan is no myth at all.
After the embarrassing loss in 1968, Michigan had to make a change, and they chose a relatively unknown coach from Miami of Ohio named Bo Schembechler.
I'm looking forward to the opportunity of working here and coaching the University of Michigan Wolverines.
Bo Schembechler came to Michigan my junior year, 1969. So I go down to the coach's office. I see Bo coming down the hallway, and I stick out my hand, and I go, "Hello, Coach Dan Deerdorf." He grabbed me, and he goes, "You're fat, you're mine, and I never forget." And I'm thinking to myself, this guy looks nuts.
I just remember covering the team at the Michigan Daily, and I was just intimidated by the man. I was just scared.
His whole thing about those who stay will be champions, that was real, because we had guys quitting every day.
Come on, Ed! Come on!
Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes had history long before they became coaches of rival teams. Bo had played for Woody at Miami of Ohio, and then spent 4 years as his assistant at Ohio State.
They were very close, but these were not two guys that told each other how much they loved each other. Their closeness was really built on professional respect, shared passion, and similarity.
If we call stick, we block it as a stick. Then as soon as you get outside that guy, go in and we can have a guard out here and go to work out to the Bo Schembechler took kind of the similar approach when it came to football, the way he liked to coach football.
Running games, repetition, fundamentals.
Mr. 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
He got that from Woody Hayes.
Like, how frequently do they play, right? Consistency. How frequently do they
But there's a deeper explanation for this rivalry between Woody and his former protege.
Conspicuous characters. Think about Ohio State, Michigan. Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler.
And our next category of rivalry ingredients explains this.
So a lot of times we see this strong similarity show up in sibling rivalries where they grow up in the same family, hold some of the same values, and especially in the case of twins or identical twins, even have the same appearance.
Twins, you say? Well, these twins seem to be rivals. Creepy.
You were measuring yourself against the closest version of yourself.
What about these twins? Yep, also rivals.
Rivals are most often people or teams who are very similar to us. Those are the targets that we most naturally compare ourselves to.
I think our shared traits help illuminate our differences. And I think that that was a big part of this too. Bo Schembechler wasn't some hippie smoking a joint on the sideline, right? He was a lot like Woody Hayes. There was so much alike that it made you notice their differences.
Bo's first face-off with Ohio State featured his number 12 ranked Wolverines and Woody's unbeatable number 1 Buckeyes.
Bo Schembechler on the sidelines here, 39 years old, in his first year as the head coach of the University of Michigan team.
Back then, if you were going to win the Big Ten, that involved beating Ohio State.
You know, 1968, Ohio State wins the national championship, has the number 1 team in the country coming back in 1969.
And as the season unfolded, that was the understanding in the country that might have been the best team of all time.
There's a tremendous amount of intensity here on both sides that the Big Ten championship has hinged on this particular game between Michigan and Ohio State.
Here's this band of Michigan Wolverines that had their behinds kicked the year before, and they had that score up everywhere. It was taped on their lockers. It was taped in the showers.
Every one of us had to wear a piece of tape across the front of our helmet that said 50-14 on it. Talk about a motivating factor.
Those guys said we knew in our bones we were going to win this game.
And the handoff goes to Billy Taylor, finds an opening, goes to the 25.
Our beating them was not a fluke. We were every bit as good as they were. They don't want to hear that, but that's the way it is.
This Michigan Stadium is absolute bedlam.
You talk about excitement. Here it is, right here in Ann Arbor.
The result was so shocking to Ohio State fans. A Woody clone beat Woody at Woody's game.
Well, Bo Schembechler must be very, very happy.
That 10-year war, it was sparked.
And so, today, November 22nd, no Michigan man will ever forget, because today is the day Ohio came to bury Michigan, all wrapped in maize.
Everything changed that November day in 1969. That game really started the modern era of Michigan football.
Oh, the Buckeyes came to bury the Wolverines, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when that game was over, it was someone else instead. 22 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as Ravelli played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away.
Liberty. That brings shouts of joy and confetti from the stand.
After Michigan's upset of Ohio State in 1969, this rivalry would enter the most intense decade of its history. But to understand the 10-year war between Woody and Bo, we have to understand how rivalries influence a key element of human behavior, motivation.
So in my research, I've found that rivalry is a pretty powerful motivating force. Encountering a rival and competing against a rival leads to a greater, what's known as promotion focus. A desire to achieve optimal or ideal outcomes, so trying to achieve your dreams. The theory for why that happens is that rivalry is this ongoing story.
It changes the game. It changes the focus from just, one of many games to the game.
It invokes much greater concerns about one's long-term legacy. That leads to a greater promotion focus.
To prove rivalries increase motivation, Gavin and his team have conducted a number of studies. One was inspired by North Carolina and Duke men's basketball. This looked at how one team's postseason performance would impact their rival's performance the following season.
The performance of a team's strongest rival predicted that team's performance in the next season. What that means is that when your rival does really well, let's say they get to the Final Four in college basketball, your team comes in the next season with renewed motivation to try to achieve or even exceed the rival's performance in that prior season.
The 10-year war could easily be another case study for this, because in the Big Ten from 1968 to 1978, Ohio State and Michigan won or shared the conference title every year. This is what happens when two coaches, two rivals, push each other to the absolute peak of performance.
After Michigan won in 1969, when Woody Hayes got home from Ann Arbor that night, he went right to his office to start working on the next year's Michigan game. He had a rug made for spring practice, and the rug said, Michigan 24, Ohio State 12. So when the players basically left the practice facility, they had to run over this rug.
Woody and Bo were benchmarking each other every day of every year.
The Big Ten, nobody challenged either one of those teams. It really was the Big Two and the Little Eight.
The Big Two and the Little Eight.
Big Two, Little Eight. You had a 9-game preseason.
And then you have a 1-game regular season because that game meant everything. What's funny about it is that neither of those teams ever won a national championship during the 10-year war. It didn't matter. That was the season.
It is the most important game. It is more important than the Rose Bowl.
That's right. And it's the most important game in college football because every doggone year it comes down to that ball game. That's it.
Woody and Bo traded blows in 1970 and 71. Then for the next 4 years, this guy graced the rivalry, and Michigan couldn't catch him.
The time that I played against Michigan, they may have lost 4 games in those 4 years. And 3 of those games were to the Ohio State University. And you got to believe that I'm very proud of that as well.
That 1 year Archie didn't win?
They finished in a 10-10 tie.
A tie in Ann Arbor in 73.
But thanks to the growing star power of Woody and Bo, Michigan versus Ohio State turned into much more than a Midwestern affair.
Brutus the Buckeye didn't exist. Somebody dressed as Woody Hayes would probably be Ohio State's mascot because of that iconic look that he had.
They should call him General Woodrow Hayes.
The Woody uniform obviously started at the top with his block O black cap. Then you got the horn-rimmed glasses, the iconic tie, the jacket that he would wear that, you know, even in the winter, he may not even wear that. And he's rocking the short sleeves, and the guy's ready for war.
I'm not fazed by snow. I'm not fazed by cold. I'm a tough guy.
Bo Schembechler definitely had a look. You'd see him often wearing this blue windbreaker. You know, he had his headset all the time. And he always wore the blue pants and his block M hat, which at the skinny M, it was his trademark hat.
Let's face it, you did need actors. These guys were absolutely perfect for the media.
Their character and legend within the two schools is folklore, to be honest with you.
Coach Woody Hayes emphasized the rivalry all year long.
Bo admitted to me later, every practice, there was something in that practice geared to the Ohio State game.
If we were playing a team that he felt we should have no problem beating, he would spend the majority of the week preparing for Michigan.
The 10-year war, I think, is what has made the game nationally.
That was back in the days when you could only put a couple games on TV. So it was the game.
It was the exclamation point of the season for college football, period.
The conspicuousness of the 10-year war was also impacted by what was happening outside of football at that time.
The rivalry begins at the height of the Vietnam War, and Woody Hayes has been modeling his program on the military and has seen it as a representation of all that the U.S. should be.
He had a hard time understanding why protests were going on.
Meanwhile, you have Bo Schembechler. Vietnam to him was like a distraction.
In a very liberal place like Ann Arbor, Michigan, they were wild times. I still have vivid memories of the Michigan National Guard lining the streets of campus because the ROTC building got burned.
Bo Schembechler, he was able to adapt because as players changed, he changed. And so once that counterculture spirit kind of dies down a little bit, now he can just coach his team. Once the Vietnam War ends and Nixon is out of office and freedom kind of overtakes campus, Woody, he struggles more and more to connect with the players. Where does that leave his football program? He's not really sure. So by the mid-70s, coaching is a lot harder for Woody Hayes than it had been, and it's getting easier for Bo Schembechler.
From 1976 to 78, Michigan won 3 straight by a combined score of 50-9. It was a clear sign of Woody's decline. But no one would have guessed how the 10-year war would ultimately come to an end.
The 78 team finished 7-4-1, and it was a frustrating season for him.
And so he's really lost his sense of place in society, but he's such a towering figure that there's no out. There's no way to go. And it all kind of builds up to this moment against Clemson where he finally loses it. And this rage, these moments of rage that he had throughout his career, boom, anyone watching it understands that's it for Woody Hayes.
For better and for worse, encapsulates what Woody Hayes here was. He was a passionate coach who genuinely hated losing.
After the quasi-punch, Woody Hayes still has his job. They're waiting to see what's going to happen. Ann Hayes, his wife, does not call the assistant coaches or the captains or the team doctor. She calls Bo and says, you have to help Woody.
Bo got in his car and drove to Woody's house.
There he is, begging Woody to apologize to save his job.
Woody kind of inched toward an apology a little bit, but it was a cop-out to him.
Soon after Woody landed that fateful punch, he was dismissed as head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes after 28 years at the helm. And the 10-year war came to an unceremonious end.
It was an end of an era. With any great rivalry, fans want that, want to hang on to it. They want this to be Woody and Bo forever. And I think Bo wanted it too, because I think that rivalries bring out the best in each other.
We scouted each other. We prepared for each other. We always thought about each other because we figured it would come down.
We never took you very seriously, Bo.
None of us like to admit this, but we can only take ourselves to a certain point. We need somebody else to raise our level. And rivalries act as like the tide lifting all boats. And so at the end, there is this mutual respect of thank you. Because without you, I would have never gotten to the level I did.
The 10-year war didn't just put Ohio State and Michigan football on the national map. Suddenly, the world knew about 2 college towns, 3 hours apart, fighting over the heartland of America. And they're proof of another rivalry ingredient we've seen throughout history.
Spatial proximity. When we study spatial proximity, we're talking about how close are the opponents to each other.
And while we're talking about this in the context of sports, we often see this in geopolitics as well.
Pakistan and India come to mind, where you've got this conflict, and that conflict also plays itself out symbolically through their sporting competitions.
Not all rivalries need proximity, i.e. Russia versus the U.S., Celtics versus Lakers, and Tupac versus Biggie. But those that do share a border, those tend to get the most heated.
The people who exist along those borders are interacting with each other more frequently, creating the psychological divide between territories.
Now, aside from the Buckeyes and Wolverines, Ohio and Michigan are pretty friendly neighboring states. But that wasn't always the case. And one border town is home to a tale of a turf war that most people do not know about.
Now, let me tell you about Toledo. Toledo is a rather typical blue-collar Midwestern community.
Toledo is the 4th largest city in Ohio. It's known for Jeep and Tony Paco's Hungarian hot dogs, the Mud Hens.
We really have a great quality of life in Toledo, and we have a deep appreciation for Ohio State and Michigan football.
Toledo is the DMZ of the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry. You want to see the toughest Ohio State or Michigan fans, go to Toledo, because that town is almost exactly divided.
You will literally have fans and families come in, they'll look at each other, and they go to the opposite sides of the store.
This is the epicenter of the feud. This is the line of scrimmage. When you look at Toledo in terms of the role it plays, the history of the rivalry, yeah, you have to go back to the War of Toledo. Long before Ohio State and Michigan started playing football, Toledo was once part of Michigan.
1837, of course. They're fighting over the Toledo Strip. this one little slice of land, crucially on Lake Erie, of course. You need the port. A deputy sheriff from Monroe, Michigan, goes down there to collect some taxes from Benjamin Franklin Stickney. He has named his sons, I swear to God, 1 Stickney and 2 Stickney.
So what happens is the Stickney's father is arrested for promoting Ohio's rightful ownership of Toledo. This enrages one Stickney, and he gets into an altercation with the arresting sheriff.
So the whole Toledo War is when one Stickney sticks Deputy Sheriff Wood in the thigh with a penknife. That's your casualty in the War of Toledo.
Ohio, in the end, claimed Toledo.
But what it really gave these two states is the greatest rivalry in sports.
And that was the beginning of this feud that was now being played out on the football field.
Snap is low, but he gets it out all right. Oh, my goodness, look at this. He runs Woodson all the way back to the 22-yard line. Woodson's got one block, another block.
We continue our journey through Joe and David's elements of rivalry with the final ingredient in the strong similarity bucket.
The last element within this category is shared supply pool.
A lot of human behavior and human history has been about competition over resources.
You know, resources that help produce the competitive nature of the rivalry.
And in this case, the finite resource is players.
You see this in college football. So think about the recruiting battles that happen between 2 different college teams, or it can be professionals competing over free agents.
When it comes to sports, resources and athletes are abundant, but elite athletes are scarce. So when you let a precious one slip between your fingers, like Ohio State has done a few times over the years, it can really add to a rivalry.
The war has no days off because they're going for the same players and the same kind of player.
Ohio is one of the best talent-producing states in college football.
I've never seen truly a great Michigan team that did not have a substantial number of Ohio natives on it.
Mario Manningham, Sean Crable,
Jim Mandich and Rob Lido,
Chris Wormley,
Prescott Burgess, Ricky Powers.
The list goes on and on. All of these great, great players from Ohio that went north.
Our team was 25% from the state of Michigan, 25% of the players were from greater Chicago, and 50% of the players were from the state of Ohio.
Of all the Ohio natives who've played for Michigan, 2 names sting Buckeye fans more than any others: Desmond Howard and Charles Woodson. Desmond Howard was an All-American from Cleveland, Ohio. He was recruited by both schools, but chose to play for the Wolverines.
Holy cow! Would you believe this?
He was a lightning bolt.
Desmond Howard was a character, is a character.
Touchdown. See, this could change the game right here.
Very few people have given me joy quite like Desmond Howard. The constant smile on his face, the big game ability.
Legendary players give us great moments at the most opportune times.
And it runs Howard back up, and his little look at that.
Desmond Howard's return over Ohio State was maybe the greatest in college football history because of who it was, the game it happened in, and what he did after he scored.
The pose.
The pose.
The Heisman pose. Ohio State fans still hate Desmond Howard to this day because he did the Heisman pose in the end zone, because he went and won the Heisman after that, because he's from Cleveland, Ohio. And they probably will hate him until the day he dies.
I think Michigan will pull off the victory today. I got Michigan in a close one.
You know, I don't know. I guess you'd have to ask the folks in Columbus if he's the most hated guy. I don't know if they would hate him more than they hate Charles Woodson.
Charles Woodson was born less than an hour away from Toledo in Fremont, Ohio. Unfortunately for the Buckeyes, the state's #1 high school recruit had grown up a Michigan fan.
Touchdown. A 70-yard touchdown run by
Charles Woodson was, he was an unbelievable high school talent. Greatness was predicted for him.
He's gonna score!
Charles Woodson was a 5-down player. 3 on defense, 1 on special teams, then 1 on offense. A true unicorn.
Throws in the middle. By Woodson.
Woodson. Yeah, I make plays. That's all to it. They do all the talking. I do the walking, baby.
In his 3 seasons at Michigan, just like Desmond Howard, Woodson never lost to Ohio State. But in 1997, he led Michigan to a national championship and became the first defensive player to win the Heisman Trophy.
From Michigan, Charles Woodson.
Him winning a Heisman over Peyton Manning says it all.
To receive this honor, the highest award given to a college football player.
The fact that he came from Ohio, you could make the case that Charles Woodson is the greatest Wolverine ever.
It's funny, the 2 Heisman winners in the last, however many years for Michigan both had punt returns against Ohio State.
I can't imagine that Ohio State fans probably never saw that coming. It's like, how do you let these guys go? But they did.
Thanks to everybody back at home in Fremont, Ohio, where I grew up, where it all started.
While Charles Woodson and Desmond Howard are just 2 of the many Ohio natives who played for Michigan,
Look out! Boren levels Gardner.
nothing epitomizes the rivalry element of shared supply pool quite like the Boren family of Dublin, Ohio.
My name is Michael Bourne. I was a linebacker at Michigan. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I wanted to be a Buckeye in the worst way. And they didn't recruit me. They didn't think I was good enough. So I ended up going to Michigan. Once I made that decision, it was almost like I hated Ohio State. I just wanted to prove to them that I could play linebacker.
All 3 of my boys came home from the hospital in Michigan sleepers. We rooted for Michigan from the get-go.
We grew up going to Michigan football games, going to Ohio State, Michigan games. Ohio State was my first offer. It was my sophomore year. Michigan offered me a little before my junior year.
Bo Schembechler kept yelling at me, saying, hey, this kid, you need to get Justin to commit to Michigan. And I says, oh, I'm not going to tell him what to do. He goes, yeah, God damn it, you will tell him what to do.
Bo, he was older. He wasn't coaching anymore, but he still had this aura. He demanded respect.
My dad and myself went up there with Justin, and Bo talked him into committing to the University of Michigan.
It's an honor and privilege to be named the University of Michigan's head football coach.
When Coach Carr retired after 2007, they named Rich Rodriguez the head coach. And, the whole atmosphere changed up there.
I don't know all the particulars on how things were run here, but I do know you've had...
I'll never forget Rich Rodriguez. Coach Carr's assistant brought him into his office one by one and fired him all before the bowl game. That didn't sit well with me. It wasn't that same Michigan way that I had seen growing up and that I had committed to play for. It got to the point that I didn't love playing football anymore.
The Pickerington native transferred from Michigan to Ohio State this spring over what he called an erosion of family values under Rodriguez.
Everything that made Michigan Michigan kind of went out the door. I think that just didn't sit well with Justin.
I tried talking him into staying, and then he said, there's no way I'm staying. Either I'm quitting football or I'm going to play for Ohio State.
Today, Justin Bourne, a guard for Ohio State, suit up in the scarlet and gray, but he was a player for Michigan.
First guy to go across enemy lines and come back.
Fans were yelling all kinds of things like traitor.
Can't recall one major player that ever did this.
I'm not gonna hold my breath waiting for the next time, a boring situation happens.
If someone would have told me 20 years ago that my kids would be playing for Ohio State, I'd say there's no way in hell that's gonna happen.
It crossed my mind that it was very unique. I got death threats, nasty messages on social media. I transferred to the biggest rival.
Look forward to the future and go Bucks.
There was a lot of people that were pretty pissed off. But, for me, it was the best decision, and I stand by that.
The Boren family's switch from Michigan to Ohio State is symbolic of a power shift in this rivalry in the 2000s. While Michigan might have won the battle for resources in the 1990s, things would soon change come the turn of the century, thanks to the recruitment of a game-changing Ohio native.
The significance of recruiting Ohio is everything in this rivalry, but there's a turning point.
Proud of our young people in the classroom, in the community, and most especially in 310 days in Ann Arbor, Michigan, on the football field.
Jim Tressel is from the suburbs of Cleveland, and he was an assistant coach for the Buckeyes in the 80s, so he'd grown up around the rivalry.
He started with Michigan. That was his focus.
That was Jim Tressel saying, I'm going to make it hard for Michigan to come down and get the Charles Woodsons, to get the Desmond Howards.
And then in year one, you beat Michigan. And then you do it again in year two, and then you go win a national title.
This was the balm for all your wounds. This guy gets it.
Tressel turned that rivalry in Ohio State's favor, and it's been a tough hole to dig out of for Michigan ever since.
Jim Tressel, that son of a bitch.
One of the most conspicuous moments in the history of this rivalry took place in 2006. Jim Tressel's #1 ranked Buckeyes looked destined for another national championship. But standing in their way was Lloyd Carr's #2 ranked Wolverines.
The game of the century was coming. Everybody could see it. It was like two super oil tankers, undefeated 1 and 2 in the nation.
The national championship implications.
How could the game get any bigger, right?
This morning, Bo Schembechler passed away here at St. John's Providence Hospital in Southfield, Michigan.
On the eve of the game of the century, Bo Schembechler passed away at the age of 77.
I got a phone call from one of my buddies, and he told me Bo Schembechler died. And I remember I started crying. Bo was like a father to me.
Those of us who played for him, we love him still. He was that important of a figure in our lives. Bo dying shook the entire foundation of the Michigan football program. Death was at their doorstep the day before that game.
This is one of the noisiest venues in college football.
A lot of great players on the field that day. Mario Manningham,
Troy Smith, Ted Ginn, Anthony Gonzalez.
There were pros everywhere.
Headed for the end zone, Chris Wells.
Teams go up and down the field, great plays, great offenses.
With White leading the way, breaking free again. Touchdown, Ohio State.
Troy Smith, on his way to a Heisman Trophy, had never been more on point in a game that mattered. And Michigan matching him almost touchdown for touchdown.
This time for Michigan.
Michigan made a late comeback in that 2006 game. They just couldn't pull it off.
Ohio State prevails. Crowd just storms onto the field.
The Buckeyes beat their arch rival again.
For all of the amazing historic Ohio State-Michigan games, there was nothing like 2006.
When I see the helmet on TV, it doesn't matter which one it is. I will say, I was working on that one. I did that paint job. When I paint Michigan helmets, I will always ask the guys around, do you want to do this? Because I don't want to do them. Michigan, plain.
The Ohio State color is extreme silver with a white stripe, a scarlet stripe, and a black stripe. On the University of Michigan side, it is a maize yellow with what we call a satin big blue.
There's Michigan fans here, unfortunately. During the Michigan-Ohio State week, there's a lot of banter on the floor.
Everybody picks on you because everybody's all Ohio State. Ohio State this, Ohio State that.
When Ohio State beats Michigan, you feel like you're part of the team.
A helmet, the logo, team colors. These are the emblems of Joe and David's final bucket of rivalry ingredients. Deep differences.
I fought for the color blue when no one else would.
No. It should be a right to enjoy red, not a privilege.
No. Blue is the most important color of our lifetime.
Red is facing an existential crisis.
My opponent knows absolutely nothing about living in a world of blue.
This is the one that people usually recognize pretty easily when they think about the psychological and the cultural components of rivalry. So one of the ingredients within the deep differences category is disparate values or disparate appearance. And that's where it's obvious that you're on different sides of the cultural spectrum. You have different belief system, and that creates this challenge in empathy.
Just seeing that color of the rival team might elicit the feelings that you would have toward that rival.
This ingredient is tied to a very important concept in social psychology that explains a lot about our obsession with sports. That is social identity theory.
Social identity theory basically looks at how part of who we are is wrapped up in the groups that we're a part of.
Political ideology, religion, our work, they all become part of our identity, and sometimes sports teams can reflect all of those different elements.
I'm sure you've heard the phrase, humans are tribal by nature. This need for human beings to identify with a group is hardwired into us as a species. That's why sports fandom has many similarities with the concept of a tribe.
We know that our ancestors who did join groups, who did find ways to affiliate, there was strength in numbers. They were more likely to survive. And so part of surviving was warding off the rival. You see that in the tendency for people to want to join things that are social in nature, such as sports fandom.
In some ways, this is the draw of college football, is that you have these groups of people, and they're these little tribes.
The feeling of connection to a college program, that sense of kinship and belonging.
I think it just brings that communal thing where maybe that guy next to you has different religion or has different politics than you in the stands, but none of that matters on a fall Saturday. You're all there to rally around one thing, and that's to see Ohio State beat Michigan.
Our impulse to form rivalries is even backed by neuroscience. When we identify a rival simply by their colors, it triggers a telling neurological reaction in our brains.
Humans are very visual. Our visual sense is our dominant sense. When we see the colors of a rival fan, we may see a response in a brain region called amygdala.
The amygdala is the region of the brain that processes emotions like fear, anxiety, and aggression.
We see it if something is threatening.
If rivals are acute threats, as Joe and David described them, then this response in our brains would support that. It also explains why you can't stand the colors of your rivals.
You'll never see me with a blue and gold combination on ever.
I don't know a Michigan fan worth his or her salt that has any love for anything that pairs the colors scarlet and gray.
Now, when Sigmund Freud argued that rivalry gave outsized meaning to minor differences, perhaps he was referring to team colors. But they do represent two fan bases that really are quite different.
From the Ohio State perspective, Michigan's always been branded as the elite academic school, maybe the arrogant school. And then you look at Ohio State, for the longest time it was an open enrollment. Michigan fans would look down on as an academic afterthought.
The old joke about Ann Arbor, AA stands for arrogant asses.
We're a wine and cheese crowd. They're a beer crowd.
Everyone knows it's a better school.
Some might call it arrogant. We just call it us. Outside of this game, we'll do things like write some of the greatest plays in the history of theater. You can also change the face of investigative journalism. You'll also change the entire game like Tom Brady. You'll end the conversation as to who's the greatest. Those are the things that Michigan fans can do. The Ohio State, perhaps not.
All right, Eisen, you've triggered me. The Ohio State has impressive alums, too. Like barrier-breaking athletes, legendary comedians, the man who built your beloved New York Yankees, and the author of The Goosebumps. Sure, you might say that Ohio State fans are more rowdy or irrational. That may be true, but I call it character. Buckeyes are weird, wild, and full of charisma. A lot like this guy.
When I was born, I was told, and it was in my instinct, in my bones, that, like, we don't like them. And generally speaking, if I see someone wearing yellow and blue, I'm like, your face. Sorry.
Now we've established how different these fan bases are. The next rivalry ingredient might help explain some of their behavior.
Dominance is another element within the category of deep differences. There's a lot of envy and scorn.
Ohio State has dominated this rivalry in recent years, but the grudge their fans hold against Michigan could root back to the early 1900s.
You know, there was always a sense of how State aspired to be among the elite in college football probably came from the inferiority complex they had from the way this thing all started.
Back then, Michigan, led by a man named Fielding Yost, were a dominant force, while Ohio State, well, they played on a cow pasture.
Well, if you ask Ohio State fans now what the early years of the rivalry were like, they know that Michigan dominated, but they also say, okay, this is classic Michigan fan looking back, way, way back to pad their record against Ohio State.
1901, Fielding Yost is your first arrogant ass if you don't like Michigan.
His 1902 team beat Ohio State 86-0.
So Ohio State's always been playing catch up in the series. Definitely has spurred Ohio State fans.
Stretches of dominance by both Ohio State and Michigan mark the history of this rivalry, but so do unlikely upsets led by now team legends.
The dominance element, this really can play into the underdog narrative where your team is trying to overcome this more dominant rival.
It's a special opportunity for the characters on the side that's being dominated to write their own part of the narrative.
The character that helped Ohio State emerge from the cow patties of Ohio Field was a 158-pound punter, passer, defender, and running back named Chick Harley.
In 1916, Chick Harley, out of East High School right here in Columbus, he led Ohio State to its very first win over Michigan. Ohio State had won none of the first 15 games.
While Harley is revered for helping end Michigan's early dominance, his greatest impact came after he left Ohio State.
When Harley finished his senior year, the demand for tickets were so great that Ohio Field, with a 20,000 seating capacity, was not big enough.
People were coming from all around to watch Chick Harley play football. They had to do something. They had a rickety old place called Ohio Field. You know, it was barely good enough to have a rodeo in.
Without Chick Harley, there's no Ohio Stadium, and without Ohio Stadium, there's no Ohio State football the way we know it.
Without Chick Harley, this rivalry may not have either of the stadiums these teams call home. And today, you can't find better cathedrals of the game than the Big House and the Horseshoe.
Howard Dwight Smith designed an architectural masterpiece. This was built to stand the test of time, and one of the reasons was he went back in time, the arches.
As you approach the rotunda, you look up and you see blue and gold, maybe a little bit of an homage to Michigan in the rivalry.
There were just all things about the Ohio Stadium that were different, made it special.
Fielding Yost had great pride in Michigan, and when he sees Ohio State with a beautiful horseshoe 6 years earlier, he thinks we better have a stadium like that and maybe bigger.
The Big House is another stadium where you always feel like you're stepping into a special place.
When you're in it, there is nothing else. It's a sensory deprivation chamber.
The history is incredible. The size of it's incredible. It's the place where I fell in love with college football.
When you come out and you see 100,000 plus, it's like going from something dark into something light.
Michigan, Ohio State, you can never, ever tear these buildings down.
Both these stadiums have provided major home field advantages in this rivalry, and they've hosted some unforgettable performances. Of course, there's some science to explain both of these phenomena. In 2003, a study was conducted on the testosterone levels of professional soccer players by taking saliva samples before matches, and there were two main findings. First, their levels were higher when playing at home versus on the road.
The theory there is that defending your home territory is more vital, and there may be an evolutionary mechanism for why that led to increased confidence, increased motivation, increased aggression if you have to fend off invading forces.
The other finding, testosterone was also higher when playing against a traditional rival.
So I think these findings help us to understand why it's often the case that the absolute height of performance in a player or a team's career comes when competing against their rival.
The elusive Tim Biakabatuka.
When you get that higher than normal level of arousal, when that heart's racing a bit more than it typically is, when you're breathing a bit faster, when there's that much more energy in the stadium for the players and the fans, everything that person does is going to be magnified.
Clements got it. Michigan leads it on the 10-yard pass from the comeback kid.
Rivalry can have these physiological effects, increasing our testosterone, making us more likely to take risks and really shoot for the moon.
There's this feeling as a player that you're willing to do anything that it takes And that willingness leads to greater effort than you've ever given at any point in your life. I think that's why we get such amazing games and performances in these rivalries.
31. Basket splitting out, sets up deep, over the middle.
After the construction of Ohio Stadium in 1922, it still took a while for the Buckeyes to turn the tide against dominant Michigan. By 1934, the Wolverines led the series by a record of 22-6-2. But then, a new character ignited a new era of the rivalry.
Francis Schmidt was introduced to the team for the first time. He said to them, "You guys haven't been beating Michigan very much, and we're going to change that."
The legend is that he said Michigan players just put their pants on one leg at a time, so Ohio State shouldn't be intimidated by Michigan.
This period marked Ohio State's most dominant stretch in the rivalry to date.
Ohio State beat Michigan his first 4 years by shutouts. Ohio State 114, Michigan 0.
And it introduced one of the game's longest-standing traditions.
You know, anytime an Ohio State team beats a Michigan team in the game, then all those players would be awarded a gold pants charm. It's got the score and the year engraved.
Dirty little secret, Bo Schembechler, the most Michigan man of all time, he's got a few of those pairs of golden pants when he was Woody Hayes' assistant coach. And as Bo told me, I don't tell people around here about those. Yeah, you don't.
This is just one of the traditions that makes the game what it is. And they range from jewelry to nutcracking to casual vandalism.
Traditions, at least from the Michigan side, in terms of the Michigan-Ohio State game, there is a march when this group of Michigan fans march to the cemetery to Bo Schembechler's grave. They place a Buckeye, and they smash the Buckeye.
I mean, honestly, their mascot is a nut.
Week before the Michigan game, all focus goes to the rivalry throughout the entire university. If you walk around the campus, there's red X's all over every single M. Now that we live in the world of social media, if a coach or a player or anybody associated with the team has an M and anywhere on their social media, they start using the red X and take the M out of it. They don't ever say the word Michigan.
What makes college football so magical? The color and the smells and the sense of it all. It's hearing the bands and seeing the two bands there at the Michigan-Ohio State game.
The fight songs are part of the rivalry. It's part of who you are. That Saturday in November when the game is played is a sacred day. The memory of that tradition is always there.
Touchdown, Michigan!
Our fight song, The Victors, when we play it at the Ohio State game, there's just something a bit more special. Everything has to get better every time. I mean, the football teams have to constantly improve, the bands do, the fans do, and that becomes an identity, and it's part of who they are.
Oh, don't play those. No. There's too much football out here. Forget it.
The reaction when we hear the Rivals fight song, your skin starts to crawl a little bit, and you just want to close your ears. Every Buckeye fan knows the fight songs here at Ohio State. Fight the team across the field and Buckeye battle cry. Ohio State fans are anticipating that rivalry literally 365 days a year. Everything that we do leads up to this point in time.
The Ohio State band at Brakeland. They'll be entertaining at halftime along with the Wolverine band. Two of the
Tradition is of utmost importance. So many sports fans follow the team that they follow because mom, dad, friends, community.
And they get socialized into this rivalry. There are also all these rituals and traditions that are overlaid on the rivalry, too.
At the end of every game day rehearsal, we kind of play the fight song, and there's always a skit, and it's always based on the opponent that we play.
the more that we partake in those rituals, the more that we're seen as a deeper member of that in-group of fans.
We have done a number of halftime shows that include some subtle and some not so subtle digs at that school up north, just to kind of poke fun.
I don't know this to be true, but I've heard that in their band facility, they have a toilet, painted maize and blue. That's how seriously, like, they have a toilet.
We have a good time here at Ohio State. We celebrate the rivalry in our own way.
Now.
As we've learned, stretches of dominance often mark the history of an old rivalry, and it usually takes a conspicuous character to disrupt that dominance. In the 1930s, someone had to spoil Francis Schmidt's great party of the Golden Pants, and that man was Tom Harmon.
Tom Harmon was the golden boy.
He played multiple positions. He was the guy.
Good-looking guy, well-spoken, just an unbelievable athlete. Tom Harmon was the Tom Brady of his time.
Tom Harmon's greatest impact probably came after his playing days were over. He became a World War II hero, then a sports broadcaster. Then he fathered Jethro Gibbs of the long-running CBS drama NCIS, a.k.a. Mark Harmon. In terms of the game, though, he spurred another swing of the old rivalry pendulum.
In 1940, against Ohio State, his last game as a player, no Rose Bowl back then, nothing else. This is the last game. Passing the ball, he goes 11 for 12, 151 yards and 2 touchdowns. Running the ball, 139 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kicks, 4 extra points, and intercepted on defense, 3 passes. And by the way, he also averaged 50 yards a punt. When he walks off that field, the Ohio State fans, stand up and give him a standing ovation. I guarantee you, it is the first and last one ever given by the Buckeye fans to a Michigan player.
Tom Harmon led Michigan to a 40-0 win over Ohio State, and he wins the Heisman Trophy.
30 years after Tom Harmon led Michigan on a hot streak, another running back would do the same for the Scarlet and Gray.
Archie Griffin, number 45, 5 feet 9.
In 1972, the North Carolina game was the second game of the year for Ohio State, and there was this player, number 45, who came into the game and he kept breaking off these runs, and people were going through their programs. Who's this number 45 guy?
Archie Griffin was this small back at Eastmore High School, just east of downtown Columbus.
He was 5'8", but he was so shifty.
They said I was too small. I probably should have gone to a smaller school where I'd get a better chance to play. So my goal was to make the varsity team in my freshman year.
Archie Griffin didn't just make the team. He made college football history.
Griffin gets away.
In his 4 years at Ohio State, he set NCAA records for most rushing yards in a career, most consecutive 100-yard games, and he became the first and only player to win 2 Heisman trophies. Oh, and he never lost to Michigan.
He is the mythical figure of college football. No one can catch him.
Gets it again, and there he is.
Archie Griffin was the king. He still is the king around here.
The greatest back this rivalry's ever seen.
Every yard I ever got against Michigan, they were tough yards. Michigan was the team that stopped my streak of regular season games with 100 yards. So Michigan was a tough opponent.
His feet. Boy, he plants them and then he moves with them. It's beautiful.
Michigan had great teams in those 4 years, and yet because of Archie Griffin and the greatness of Ohio State, they never went to a bowl game.
And that's one of the proudest things that I can say about my time playing football. Never lost to them. We had the one tie, but we never lost to them.
Ah, we've made it to the tie of 1973. No rivalry would be complete without a good controversy, right? Well, this one is a prime example of the final ingredient in the deep differences category.
Discrimination by authority is where there's this perceived unfairness in the rivalry.
Could be the conference, it could be the league, it could be the media, where the media is always putting that rival team on TV. They're showing preference for them. All those examples lead to this perception of injustice.
To be honest, there haven't been too many examples of injustice in this rivalry, but there are a couple. And none more egregious than during the height of the 10-year war.
All right, here's the pattern. Michigan wins in 69, Ohio State wins in 70. Michigan wins in 71, Ohio State wins in 72. 73, you got to figure Michigan's shot. They're both ranked in the top 4. So this is essentially damn near a tryout for a national title game.
Right here on this tartan surface in 1973, will you ever forget that ball game? Michigan 10-0, Ohio State 10-0, the Buckeyes, #1 in the country 11 out of 13 weeks.
Yeah, the 73 game, it was intense. You know, I got sick before the game. I was just nervous and pumped up to play.
Michigan always has this Michigan Club banner, and that's what the Ohio State players, somebody yelled, "Let's get the banner."
This is the acting captain, John Hicks, and they're tearing down Michigan's coveted and club banner. They will need it.
That thing before the game, the banner, it was not planned. It just happened. That banner happened to be in our way, and we went through it.
It's an amazing game. It's back and forth. It's everything you think it's going to be.
Ohio State dominated the first half. Michigan dominated the second half.
Look at this, touchdown!
Michigan missed a couple field goal opportunities late. Michigan's quarterback, Dennis Franklin, was hurt in that game.
These games were just tug of wars. The tension was incredible. It was nuts.
It's a memorable 10-10 tie in Ann Arbor.
It's the only game that year that both teams did not win.
But there wasn't a doubt, along with 40 million people on TV, along with you and me, who didn't think that Michigan had outplayed Ohio 45 minutes out of 60.
At that time, the Rose Bowl representative would be determined was the athletic directors would get together and vote.
Think about how stupid this is. No one ever thought you might need a tiebreaker because they got the exact same record at 10-0-1.
So basically, going into that vote on Sunday, Ohio State needed 6 votes. Michigan needed only 5. Now, who's going to vote for Michigan? Michigan's going to vote for Michigan. You know, they're going to do that. So is Indiana, so is Iowa, and so is Minnesota. And that's 4. Who's going to vote for Ohio State? Ohio State's going to vote for Ohio State, certainly. So is Purdue, Illinois, Northwestern, and Wisconsin. 9 votes have been cast. The 10th and deciding vote, Michigan State. Now, Bo Schembechler always referred to Michigan State as the sister school. Michigan State cast its vote for Ohio State, giving Ohio State 6 votes. And that's how the Buckeyes got to the Rose Bowl at the end of the 1973 season.
Dealing Michigan its darkest hour in 95 years of playing the game of football, when it was learned that the athletic directors had not voted Michigan to the Pasadena Classic.
And that vote just pissed off Bo.
This is the lowest day in my athletic career.
And I know Michigan were a little upset with that, and they should have been. But you know what? If you're the home team, you have an advantage. And if you couldn't beat us at home, then why do you deserve to go to the Rose Bowl?
The bad blood that developed from that game, I think, still resonates with Michigan fans to this day.
Joy at the suffering of others. We've all felt it before. But this feeling has a name.
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude, which literally means harm joy in German, plays a big part in rivalries. And it's at the heart of the discrimination by authority ingredient. Neuroscientists have long been curious about where this feeling comes from, and Dr. Grit Hein recently conducted a study with Swiss soccer fans to understand it at a neurological level.
So we created a situation in which our fans knew that the fan of the rival team will receive a kind of painful stimulation on the hand.
Using fMRI brain imaging, Dr. Hein was focused on the nucleus accumbens, which is the brain's reward center. And the results were exactly what she expected.
Fans who really hated the rival team showed activation in this part of the brain when they observed pain in the rival team. This is like the essence of Schadenfreude.
As far as Schadenfreude goes in this rivalry, ooh, you Michigan fans remember that one.
Appalachian State.
Embarrassing.
Sets in sports history. Lions scoop it up.
No. No, come on, don't remind me of that.
Ball's up in the air.
Yeah.
Touchdown.
Oh, man, what a classic. Okay, all right, moving on. Why don't we talk about what happened in 2016?
You know, that game.
The spot.
The fourth down.
Did he get it?
Controversy and drama.
Did he get the first down?
Clearly, this game left a lasting impact. But first, it's important to understand who it was led by. Two characters, born months apart in, where else but Toledo, Ohio.
After the 2011 season, Ohio State hires Urban Meyer.
It's a great opportunity to come back to my home state, where I was born, where I grew up.
Urban Meyer grew up an Ohio State fan. He loved Ohio State. He was a graduate assistant at Ohio State. He was the first coach that came to Ohio State as big as the program.
The introduction of Urban Meyer into this rivalry should be like a chapter in and of itself. He brought a level of intensity that Michigan wasn't ready for.
You didn't have to wonder if Urban Meyer got the rivalry. He was pure Ohio.
Michigan had fallen onto some hard times. After Lloyd Carr leaves, they just couldn't get it right. They're desperate, so they turn to a Michigan man.
Jim Harbaugh was named head coach of Michigan.
It was Harbaugh or bust. We needed him. I mean, we needed him in the worst way.
Nobody knows this rivalry more than Jim Harbaugh.
He was a Michigan man through and through. His dad coached there. He was a quarterback there.
Here comes the bomb. Harbaugh throws a perfect strike to Colasar.
My freshman year of college, 1986, Jim Harbaugh guaranteed victory against Ohio State.
I guarantee we'll beat Ohio State this Saturday.
They do it.
You look at Jim Harbaugh and Urban Meyer both being born within a year of each other at the same Toledo hospital. Maybe they were natural-born rivals.
Michigan has not won in Columbus since the year 2000. The Buckeyes have been
2, it's 3. Michigan is going to go to the playoff if they win that game.
Harbaugh hasn't been back here since he was a player and guaranteed a Michigan victory.
Going up into the horseshoe, Michigan brought their A game.
Off the hands of Samuel, intercepted by Peppers.
They were probably a more talented team than we were. I was proud of the way our kids competed.
You're watching going, wow, this is pretty incredible. And they go to double overtime.
It's the only overtime game in the history of the Ohio State-Michigan series. Ohio State had a 4th and 1. They're down 27-24.
Urban Meyer elects to go for it.
Wolverines need a stop. Then all the misery head-to-head.
Everybody in the stadium, everybody watching on TV knows that means quarterback run.
Keeper. Head. Right at the marker. The spot will decide it.
I can still remember Michigan players looking at the scoreboard, jumping up and down on the sideline because we got them, we stopped them, it's over.
This is going to be scrutinized, clear in Harbaugh's mind.
Yeah.
After review, the play stands as called on the field.
Ohio State got the benefit of the doubt, and on the next play,
Samuel cuts it back. Ohio State wins.
Right there.
Just how far away.
you know, they'll never forget that play.
Michigan's misery in this building continues.
That sucked. To my grave, that wasn't a first down. What a bunch of bull.
That spot. It was not. My view of the first down was it was that short.
That's that famous Harbaugh where he's like, how close? He's like, this close. Like, dude, it's first down, bro. To be the spoiler for that team up north is the absolute best thing. I want them to lose every game.
With that, we have now gone through all the ingredients of our rivalry rubric. And thanks to the No Rivalry Project, we can reveal exactly how fans feel about this rivalry.
You know I love you. Here's a Michigan fan talking about Ohio State. Their fans are increasingly arrogant and vile, so I hate Ohio more than ever. I hate their colors.